It all began on what felt like the most ordinary Sunday of my life. Nothing unusual, no warning signs, no strange feelings creeping over me. I had no idea that before dinner, I would be standing in my own hallway with my hands cuffed, watching my parents nod politely while I was taken away. If I had known what was coming, maybe I wouldn't have worn socks with holes in them. But I didn't know. Not until the knock. 2 sharp knocks. That was all it took to change everything. I opened the door and saw 3 police officers standing there. One was tall and serious, the other built like a gym teacher who hadn't smiled in years. Both wore uniforms, both looked calm, like they had done this 1,000 times before. My mouth went dry. Not because I had done something wrong, but because no one expects police officers to show up at your door like you had ordered them from a menu. "Maya Hawk?" the taller one asked. "Yeah," I answered, though it came out more like a question. "We received a tip about illegal substances at this address," he said flatly. "We like to come in." For a moment, the world around me seemed unchanged. The same street, the same mailbox, the same neighbor's dog peeking through the fence. But inside me, something shifted. Everything felt tilted, just a little off balance. I stepped back without even thinking. "Oh, okay," I said. I didn't tell them no. Why would I? I wasn't guilty. I had nothing to hide. At that moment, I thought this had to be about my sister. She had always been dramatic, always stirring trouble, but never in my wildest dreams did I think she would go this far. The officers moved down the hallway with practiced steps, and I followed, still confused, still trying to piece together what they had said. Illegal substances. That was when I realized how serious this was. Hours later, everything became clear. My sister had planted drugs in my room. She had called the police herself and told them where to look. And the worst part? My parents stood by her side. They backed her up as witnesses, even though they knew I was innocent. When I begged them to tell the truth, they looked me straight in the eye and told me to just take the blame. "Just admit it," my father said. "It will be easier this way." But easier for who? Not for me. For a while, I thought my life was over. I thought the lies of my sister and the betrayal of my parents would crush me. But then my lawyer revealed something. A piece of evidence that turned everything around. I'll never forget the look on my mother's face when she saw it. She went pale. My father, usually so quick to lecture, was completely speechless. In that moment, their world tilted instead of mine. Had Leilani finally gone too far? That thought hit me just as I saw my mom. She was sitting in the living room, calm as ever, a cup of tea in her hand, like she was waiting for friends, not the police. "Oh, officers," she said smoothly, setting her cup down. "Maya's room is the 3rd door on the left." I froze. "What? Why my room?" No one answered. My dad stood nearby. He didn't look shocked. He didn't even look at me. The officers didn't hesitate. They walked straight down the hall like they already knew where they were going. At the top of the stairs, Leilani leaned on the railing. Her hair was tied back. She wore a hoodie and leggings, her phone in her hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't even blink. My old dog, Max, lifted his head when they passed. He didn't bark. He just wagged his tail once, slow, like he wasn't sure what was happening. The taller officer scanned the room. The other one walked straight to my dresser. He didn't pause, didn't check anywhere else. He pulled open the bottom drawer. There it was. A sealed plastic bag full of pills. I let out a laugh, short and shocked. Because what else can you do when life suddenly tilts off track? "Okay, that's not mine," I said quickly. The officers didn't react. They had heard those words too many times before. I spun around. My parents were standing in the hallway now. Mom's hands were folded in front of her like she was praying. Dad still wouldn't look at me. "Tell them," I said louder. "You know that's not mine." One officer looked straight at them. "You said earlier you've seen her with this bag?" My mom nodded, soft and steady. "Yes." We didn't know what it was, but she's been distant. We thought it was stress. My dad added, "School, you know, but she's been acting strange. Spending a lot of time alone." It was like I was watching someone else's world collapse, except it was mine. My room. My drawer. My name. You can't be serious, I said. I looked at Leilani. She's the one who… Maya. My mom cut me off. Her voice was low, warning. Don't make this worse than it already is. And that was it. They cuffed me right there in the hallway. Max stood up, unsure, whining softly. One of the officers told him to stay back. Leilani still hadn't moved. She just stood there watching, silent, as my life fell apart. Her eyes stayed on me as I walked out the front door. No smile. No guilt. Just an empty stare, like I was already gone. I didn't cry. Not then. The handcuffs were tight around my wrists. The air felt heavy, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Even my own skin felt strange, like I had left it behind in the hallway, next to the life I thought I had. The back seat of the police car was small and uncomfortable. The window beside me was cloudy with smudges. As the car pulled away, I stared into the rearview mirror and watched my house grow smaller and smaller. It didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like home, and somehow that made the pain worse. Leilani had planted the drugs. My parents backed her up, and I let them walk me out like I was the family shame they had finally gotten rid of. Maybe in their eyes, I really was. There was always a golden child in our family, and it wasn't me. Leilani was born 4 years before me, and from the very start, she seemed to shine in every way I didn't. She was bright, confident, pretty. Her room was always neat. Her smile was always camera-ready. When Leilani cried in public, strangers offered her candy. When I cried, I was told to stop making a scene. I don't think my parents wanted me to feel invisible, but they made me feel that way again and again. Subtle things, small things, but they added up. It took me years to realize I wasn't imagining it. When Leilani brought home a crooked clay bowl from art class, my parents cleared space on a living room shelf to show it off. When I spent 3 full days painting something for the school fair, my work ended up in a drawer with expired coupons. When Leilani had a piano recital, my parents rented chairs and made iced tea for the neighbors. When I got a part in a school play, they didn't even come. Later they said they thought it was just a rehearsal. They weren't cruel. They just chose where to place their attention. And most of the time, it wasn't on me. It felt like I was only there to fill the space between Leilani's achievements. A background character in their story. Someone easy to overlook. I used to think that if I was perfect, if I got good grades, kept my room clean, stayed quiet, and never caused trouble, then maybe they'd notice me. Maybe they'd finally be proud. But all it did was make me easier to forget. When Leilani turned 15, she begged for a dog. She made lists and promises, using big words like responsibility and emotional support. My parents gave in, of course. That's how Max came into our lives, a skinny, nervous little mutt who looked like someone had tried to make a terrier but got it wrong. Leilani adored him for about 4 weeks. Then she got bored. She said he smelled, said he was too noisy, said his claws scratched the floor. My parents nodded seriously and even started calling shelters. I still remember my mom saying, "Well, if no one takes him, we'll have to put him down." Like he was just an old machine that had stopped working. I was 11. I begged them to let me keep him. I promised I would feed him, walk him, and train him. They didn't believe me, but they didn't want to deal with him either. So they finally gave in. "Fine," my mom said. "But he's your responsibility." To me, he wasn't a responsibility. He was the first living thing in that house that chose me instead of Leilani. He slept pressed against my legs at night. He barked whenever people yelled. He followed me from room to room, his tail thumping like I was his whole world. And maybe I got too attached. Maybe I talked to him more than I talked to other people. But Max listened, and sometimes that was all I needed. The only adult who really saw me was my grandfather. He lived about 10 blocks away, in a yellow house that always smelled like toast and old wood. Whenever home got too heavy, I'd grab Max's leash and say I was going for a walk. Then we'd slip away to Grandpa's place, where it actually felt like we belonged. He wasn't like my parents. He didn't cut me off or tell me what I should do. He just made grilled cheese sandwiches and listened while I talked about school or books or how Leilani had screamed at me for touching her shampoo. Sometimes I stayed on his porch until the streetlights came on. Sometimes I wished I didn't have to leave at all. Grandpa is in his 90s now, still sharp, still steady. He calls me every Friday at 10 in the morning, without fail. He still acts like I'm the one worth checking on. When Leilani left for college, the house got quieter. Not peaceful, just empty. My parents started texting her every hour, like she was a missing part of themselves. Then one day, about a year later, she came back. No warning, no explanation, just college was toxic. That was all she said. That was her explanation. She locked her bedroom door most of the time, took long showers, and had friends over at strange hours. Guys I didn't know. One of them wore sunglasses inside the house. Another called me little sis, with a wink that made me want to scream. I noticed things. The smell coming from under her door. The slurred way she spoke on phone calls. How she jumped whenever someone knocked too loudly. But I didn't ask questions. In our house, asking questions always meant you were overreacting. I also noticed how she lingered around me more. She would pause by my room or look at me a little too long. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just paranoid. Even if I wasn't, what could I have done? Nobody in that house would have listened to me anyway. The next night, they put me in a holding cell. The walls were made of cold cinder blocks, and there was a bench just wide enough to sit on but not to lie down. No one told me what was happening. No charges, no timeline. Just silence, cold air, and buzzing lights overhead that sounded like they were laughing at me. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even really thinking. My mind felt emptied out, like it had been drained and replaced with static. I kept picturing Max. I imagined him sitting by the window, his ears lifting every time a car passed. I knew he wouldn't eat until I came home. He was like that, loyal even when it hurt him. But I wasn't there. I thought about my parents saying, "We can't keep him now. Not under the circumstances." Like Max was part of the evidence. Like he'd been tainted too. Then I thought about Grandpa. I wondered if he'd gotten the call. If his voice had cracked when they said my name. Maybe he believed I was innocent. Maybe he didn't. Either way, I could imagine the silence that followed. The heavy kind, the kind that hangs between people who don't know what to say anymore. I looked down at my hands. My wrists still showed faint red marks from the cuffs. I hadn't spoken to anyone since the officers drove me in. No one had asked if I was okay. No one even seemed to care. And the worst part? I couldn't even blame them. Maybe I really was invisible. Maybe that made me the perfect person to disappear. When you grow up believing that being quiet and good will make people notice you, it hurts to realize they won't. They just get better at pretending you don't exist. They finally brought me into the visitation room. I felt less like a person and more like a prop in someone else's courtroom drama. The room was bright with buzzing fluorescent lights. The walls were gray cinder blocks, cold and plain. A single table sat in the middle, the kind that had probably seen more betrayals than truths. A guard stood by the back wall, pretending not to hear anything. My parents were already seated when I walked in. They didn't look upset or worried. They looked like people waiting for a table at a restaurant, calm and patient, maybe a little annoyed at the delay. My mom gave me a soft smile. My dad gave me his usual slow nod, the one he used when he didn't want to speak, but wanted to show he had noticed me. I sat down. No one spoke at first. Then my mom broke the silence. "Are they treating you okay?" she asked, her voice polite, almost warm. It sounded like she was asking if the hotel had clean towels. "They gave me a sandwich," I said. She smiled again, as if that answered something important. My dad shifted in his seat. "We send over some toiletries. They'll probably get them to you soon." I didn't reply. I was too busy noticing how carefully they avoided my eyes. It wasn't guilt, and it wasn't fear. It was control, like they were trying to manage a situation, to keep it neat and contained. Finally, I spoke. My voice was flat, quiet. "You know it wasn't me." Neither of them reacted. My mom took a careful breath, like she was about to read from a script. "Maya, we need to focus on what happens next. We can't change what's already happened." "That's one way to avoid saying it out loud," I muttered. My dad leaned forward. "No one's saying it was intentional. I turned my head to him. You mean the drugs Leilani put in my drawer? That kind of unintentional? My mom winced just a little. Maya, this isn't the time for stories. Stories? I said. You're really going to sit here and let this happen to me? You're just going to watch while they do this. You're young, my dad said slowly. This won't follow you forever. My mom nodded. It's better to keep things contained. If we escalate this, Maya, it could get worse for all of us. And there it was. The word they never said but meant every time family. Not Leilani. Not the truth. Just the image, the unit, the appearance of being fine. I sat there, silent, watching them dance around it. They looked at me like they hoped I would finally be useful and disappear quietly. So, I asked the only question that mattered to me. What are you going to do with Max? They blinked. My dad was the first to answer. He's fine. Then he paused. But he's old. And you're not coming home anytime soon. My mom's voice softened too much, like she was trying to cover a wound I couldn't stop bleeding. It's not fair to leave him wondering. He doesn't understand what's happening. And you are not putting him down. My voice stayed calm. I didn't raise it, didn't move. I just said it like it was fact. My mom gave me that soft, pitying look I hated more than her anger. We'll do what's best, she said. I leaned back in my chair. I didn't answer. What was the point? They weren't here to see me. They weren't here to fight for me. They were here to hand me the script, to make sure I stayed quiet while they carried the story into the next act. When they stood up to leave, my mom paused for just a moment. She spoke like it was a final line in a play. We found someone to represent you. A lawyer. Her name's Ruby. She's very capable. Capable of what? I didn't ask. They didn't wait for me to respond. They just walked out. The next morning I met Ruby. She looked like she had something to prove, and too much on her schedule. My parents had probably chosen her because she seemed cheap or too new to push back. Her blazer was a little too big on her shoulders, and instead of a laptop, she carried a spiral notebook. She didn't smile when she sat down. Maya, she said, glancing at my file. I've reviewed the report and spoken with your parents. I bet you have, I thought. They're very concerned, she went on. They said this kind of behavior is unusual for you. But they also mentioned you've been withdrawn. Have you been feeling isolated lately? I just looked at her and blinked. I'd learned a long time ago that keeping quiet was safer. She raised her eyebrows but didn't press me. I want to go over the evidence with you, she said. We need to talk about the item found in your dresser. I didn't put it there, I said quickly. My sister did. She paused. Not long, but long enough to notice. You're saying your sister planted it? Yes. And your parents? She asked. They know. They're helping her cover it up. Ruby folded her hands and studied me. Do you have any proof of that? My mouth opened, then closed again. For a moment I had nothing. And then, like a flash, I remembered. The bear. The stupid stuffed bear on my bookshelf with a tiny camera hidden in its glass eye. Motion activated. Recorded to a little micro SD card. It was cheap, maybe $30 online. No Wi-Fi, no cloud storage. Just a card you had to pull out and check on a laptop. I had bought it last year, when Max started having seizures. I only wanted to keep an eye on him while I was gone. Every day after school, I'd pop the card out and check the footage. The quality wasn't great. It wasn't high-tech, but it worked. And nobody knew about it. It wasn't that I was hiding the camera. It was just that no one cared about Max except me. And if my family found out I had a camera in my room, I'd never hear the end of it. But the little bear faced my dresser, and it had a full view of the room. If Leilani went in there while I was gone, it might have caught her. My heart sped up, but I kept my face calm. If I told Ruby right then and she mentioned it to my parents, the footage might vanish before anyone could check. I had to get to it first. They gave me one phone call. I used it. My best friend answered on the second ring. Hey, I said quickly. I need a favor. Urgent, she asked. Are you okay? No, I said. Listen, there's a teddy bear on my bookshelf, the one with the red bow. Inside is a camera. It records everything. I need you to go to my house, get Max, and take the bear with you.
Today.
Don't ask questions. Just go. She paused for only a second. Okay, I'm on it. I'm serious, I pressed. Don't tell anyone. Don't leave it there. I won't, she promised. When I hung up, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For the first time in days, I felt like I had something. I didn't know what the footage would show. I didn't know if the card still worked. But it was a thread I could hold on to, the only thing in this whole nightmare that might still belong to me. They thought I would go down quietly. They forgot who they raised. Still, doubt crept in. What if the camera hadn't been on? What if the card had filled up? What if Leilani had already found it and erased everything? What if the bear had just sat there, blinking at nothing, useless, like one more thing that couldn't protect me? I didn't know. So I waited. Hours passed. Then a whole day. I sat in the holding cell staring at the walls, thinking about all the versions of my life playing out without me. Max locked in a shelter. Grandpa hearing only half the story. My parents reshaping me into something they could live with. Finally, an officer called my name. He said my legal counsel was waiting. They led me to a small gray room with a table and 2 chairs. Ruby was already there, flipping through a folder like she'd been waiting long enough to get bored. She looked up, set her pen down, and said, "We have something." "You're going to want to be there," Ruby said. She didn't show me the footage right away, only told me what was on it. Leilani, in my room, at my dresser. A Ziploc bag. A clear timestamp. "It's clear," Ruby said. Deliberate. No confusion. "Do they know?" I asked. "Not yet," she replied. "But they will." She had scheduled a meeting, a pre-trial conference, technically. Just a chance to set the record straight before anything else moved forward. Professional. Neutral. My parents agreed. Leilani agreed. The courthouse room was small, with cheap laminate furniture and buzzing lights. Everything beige, like the walls were tired of listening to lies. Ruby and I were already seated when they walked in. My mom came first, wearing a pressed blouse and a tight jaw, like she had practiced sounding worried. My dad followed, face flat and unreadable. Then Leilani. Her arms were crossed, hoodie sleeves pulled down over her hands, like making herself smaller could make her invisible. They sat across from us. Ruby opened her folder.
Calm. Steady.
No small talk. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to share a short piece of video evidence." She turned her laptop toward them and pressed play. On the screen, Leilani walked into my room like she owned it. No hesitation, just nerves. She glanced around, paused at the doorway, then went straight to my dresser. From her sleeve, she pulled a Ziploc bag, opened the bottom drawer, and slid it inside. She didn't touch anything else. She didn't even look guilty. Then she left. Timestamp. 1 day before my arrest. My mom's face went pale, not like she'd seen a ghost, but like she had become one. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Her eyes flicked to Leilani, then away. My dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the laptop as if he hoped it would glitch and show him something different. Leilani sat stiffly, watching herself betray me on screen. She didn't speak until the video ended. Then, as if the words spilled out before she could stop them, she said, "It was supposed to be nothing." She wasn't even supposed to get arrested. Ruby calmly turned the screen back toward herself. "So," she said, "would you like to change your statements now?" The silence was sharp, ready to break. And my mom was the first to crack. "We were trying to protect the family," my mom said, her voice tight. "You don't understand." "No," I answered. "I do. I've always understood. That's the problem." Leilani spun toward me. "You don't get it," she snapped. "You made everything harder. You acted like a victim even before anything happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "So framing me was what?"
I asked.
"Plan B." Her eyes flashed. "You wouldn't understand. You always think you're better than us." "I don't," I said quietly. "I just think I deserve better than this." My dad finally spoke. "This isn't helping," he muttered. He didn't say who it wasn't helping. He didn't apologize. He didn't say much at all. Ruby calmly slid the laptop back into her bag. I'll be submitting the footage to the prosecutor this afternoon, she said. We'll be moving to have all charges against Maya dismissed. And we'll also be filing a report on the false statements your family gave. My mom's breath caught like she'd been hit in the chest, but she tried not to show it. Leilani looked like she wanted to argue, but no words came. I sat still, steady. For once, they had to sit in silence while I watched them fall apart. No one said goodbye. Leilani stood first, then my dad. My mom paused at the door, looking back like she might say something important. But she didn't. She just walked out. They looked at me like I was the one who betrayed them. I told Ruby as we packed up. She glanced at me. They know exactly what they did. That's what makes it worse. We didn't speak again after that. They thought I would take the fall for the family. But in the end, I was the only one who saw where the ground gave way. Later, Max's tail thumped softly against the floor as he settled under my chair, his head resting against my foot. He was older now, slower than before, but he was safe, fed, and still mine. I was at Grandpa's house, the yellow one with the uneven steps and the fridge that hummed too loud. He handed me a glass of water and sat across from me like we were about to talk about the weather. But he didn't ask how I was. He didn't need to. Instead, he said, I told them, that I was planning to leave everything to you. I blinked. You what? He shrugged. Couple weeks before they had you arrested. I figured they'd hear it eventually. Might as well come from me, Grandpa said. You're the only one in the family who shows up when there's nothing in it for you. I thought that was obvious. I stared at him. You never told me. Didn't think I had to, he said. Apparently you did, I replied. He leaned forward. 4 weeks after that, your mom called me. Said you'd been arrested for drug dealing. Said I should rethink my will. Your dad said the same thing. They claimed they were just trying to protect the family legacy. My grip on the glass tightened. Did you believe them? He looked me in the eye.
No.
But I didn't argue either. I called a lawyer. He stood, opened a drawer, and handed me a thick manila folder. I didn't change the will, he said. I got rid of it. It's a trust now. Living, irrevocable. Already signed and filed. You'll hear from the attorney next week. I sat frozen. You mean it's mine already? He smiled. It's yours. No one can touch it. They can't rewrite this one. Under the table, Max nudged my leg like he understood, like he'd been waiting for this moment too. They tried to erase me to protect their future. But I already had one without them. The sentencing came 4 weeks later. Leilani pled guilty to 2 felonies, possession with intent to distribute and conspiracy to file a false report. She took a deal, 4 years in state prison, minimum of 2 before parole. She's serving her time in a women's facility upstate. She broke during questioning. She told them it hadn't been her idea. She told them it was about the inheritance. She said my parents promised I'd be fine, that I'd only get probation. She cried in court. It didn't help. My parents were convicted too, obstruction of justice, false reporting, conspiracy to commit perjury. No plea deals. They each got 19 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. They lost more than time. They lost friends. They lost their reputation. They lost each other. According to the lawyer, they don't even speak anymore. It wasn't the truth that broke them. It was turning on each other. I still live with the echo of it. I still think about what might have happened if I hadn't remembered the bear. If I hadn't made that call. If I had stayed quiet like they expected me to. They almost took everything from me. My name, my future, even the people I cared about. Almost. But they didn't. Grandpa never once asked me to forgive them. He didn't give me some tired speech about family being everything or how blood was supposed to matter more than betrayal. Instead, he poured me another cup of tea, sat beside me on the porch, and let the silence feel safe for the first time in years. Sometimes I wonder if my parents thought I'd thank them one day. Like maybe years from now I'd show up at their door. Older, humbled, grateful for the lesson. Like the pain they gave me was some kind of medicine I didn't know I needed. But I wasn't a patient. I was a daughter, a sister, a scapegoat. And I healed in spite of them, not because of them. People sometimes ask if I'll ever see them again. The truth is, I don't know. I'm not angry every day anymore. Some days I even forget the sound of Leilani's voice. Other days, I remember it perfectly. What I haven't forgotten is how I felt when I saw that video. That moment when I stopped waiting for them to save me and realized I had to save myself. After everything ended, I moved into Grandpa's house. He offered, and I didn't think twice. I fixed up the spare bedroom, repainted the hallway, and cleaned out the attic with Max at my side, sniffing each box like it was treasure. That yellow house became mine in ways my childhood home never was. I started classes again. First online, then part-time at the community college. I chose criminal justice, strange, maybe, but not because I wanted revenge. I wanted to understand. I wanted to learn about the system that had nearly crushed me. I wanted to be able to help people who didn't have a hidden camera and a bear or a friend to make that life-saving call. One night, about 7 months after the trial, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. Leilani. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't open it. I didn't burn it either. I just slipped it into a drawer with the other things I wasn't ready to face. My parents never wrote. Never called. The only thing I got from them came through their lawyer, an official notice about probate. I forwarded it to mine without a second thought. I didn't feel the need to respond. There was nothing left to say. But Max, he never needed words. He still followed me from room to room. He still barked at the microwave like it had done him wrong. He still curled up against my legs at night, like he knew I needed something steady and good to hold on to. He's older now, slower. Sometimes he limps. Sometimes he sleeps so still that I hold my breath until I see his chest rise again. But he's here. He made it through. And so did I. Grandpa always says healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it's as simple as not picking up the phone, even when you could. I used to believe surviving meant keeping the peace, no matter the cost. Now I know it means keeping myself safe. It means protecting the parts of me they tried to break. So if you're hearing this, if your family has ever made you doubt your worth, if you've ever been the one they left behind, blamed, or ignored, know this. You are not alone. And you don't have to disappear to be free. I'm Maya. I'm still here. And this time, I'm not going anywhere.